Welcome to the social show. It is so cold. I don't know how I even got out of bed, and I don't know if you're out of bed yet. You probably are, but it is way too cold. The weekend actually reminded me that Joburg weather can be really brutal. But I hope you're gonna have a productive week, and you're not gonna just blame the cold or blame the flu for not going to work. Go to work, do your job, and let's make the country better. Anyway, as usual, we're going to start the news top of the show. Yeah. According to the South African Wind Energy Association, SAWA, the National Energy Regulatory's Electricity Subcommittee has launched a formal investigation into Eskom's conduct after it filed a complaint regarding Eskom's failure to sign the Department of Energy's power purchase agreements. SAWA declared a dispute during October 2016, requesting NERSA to undertake an investigation into Eskom's continued unwillingness to honor the power purchase agreements. In the event that Eskom is found to be guilty of failing to comply with its license conditions, the Industry Association further requested NERSA to impose a penalty being 10% of its annual turnover per day, commencing on the day of the receipt of the notice of contravention. SAWA has also confirmed that in subsequent communications with NERSA, the association extended the complaint to include consideration of budget quote escalation effects. In other news, 5 local PET collectors in Harrismith community have received waste recycling trolleys from the partnership of Boxmore Packaging and Petco, the organization responsible for fulfilling the South African PET plastic industry role of extended producer responsibility. The 5 beneficiaries of the trolleys will sell their PET to Vans Buy Back Centre, and this arrangement will allow the waste pickers' progress to be tracked and their need for assistance to be monitored. Those involved in the initiative are committed to helping these individuals reach their full earning potential and stimulating awareness around the importance of recycling. Commenting on the project, Boxmore Harrismith factory manager Neil Bersendale said their company is one of the biggest employers in Harrismith, and therefore they are both directly and indirectly partly responsible for the socio-economic well-being of the community. Lastly, in our news aimed at raising awareness for healthy living for school-aged children in South Africa, Merck recently announced their launch of the Gen 100 program. The program is the second under the flagship We 100 initiative, and Merck's consumers' health business purpose that aims to help prepare society for a new era of humans living 100 healthy years. Thanks to the increase in life expectancy since 1945, today's young people are more likely to live for 100 years. However, there is no guarantee that the next generation will live these extra years in a healthy state. In order to live longer, healthier lives, and for healthier lives, there needs to be improvements in overall well-being and, more importantly, children's health, so that the young people today will live healthier and longer in their older age. Gen 100 is specifically aimed at addressing health issues among South African school children. And for example, in 2014, an estimated 41 million children under the age of 5 years were overweight or obese, and once considered a high-income country problem, being overweight and obese is now on the rise, and in low and middle-income countries, particularly in urban settings. But anyway, medical journals, data-driven visual aids, commissioned research, and support from key opinion leaders will help strengthen the Gen 100 program, and the Gen 100 program will use materials, exercises, and challenges to create changes in kids' behavior. The program started as a pilot school activation on the 8th of May 2017 and will be launched in 40 different schools throughout the rest of 2017. For more information about We 100 initiative, go to the Facebook page, which is www.facebook.com/We100, and you will find out a little bit more about them. And that concludes our news for the day.
Have you ever thought about the power of social media? Social media has the power to make your business grow. Yeah. Why don't you let us manage your social media? Because our business is to see your business grow. Visit us at www.bstownmedia.co.za.
Now, as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, that this past weekend was brutally cold, and it just made me really, really lazy. I just didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to be home underneath my blankets, with the heater on, with a good book, and that's exactly what I did. But I think, again, when you think about winter and you think about what's happening in our streets, you cannot not think about people that are homeless and people who don't have anywhere to go during this really, really bad weather. So today on the show, I'm just going to speak a little bit about the kind of initiatives that are being rolled out now for homeless people, especially during this time where it's really, really horrible to be not to be inside of a shelter, not to be warm, not to have a blanket. It is completely crazy. And I mean, it's only May, and it's already really like crazy cold. I know in other parts of the country it's snowing already. Lesotho, it was snowing. So there's a lot of different things that are going to be really, really, I think, destroying or really making the lives of those who don't have anywhere to go really difficult this time of the year. We all know. In fact, we are broadcasting from Melville, and I think last year there was somebody, a homeless person, who died in one of our streets because of the cold, because they had nowhere to go. And I mean, homeless people are everywhere. And I wonder how many of you have thought about it today when you woke up, when you drove to work, when you walked to work, whatever the case may be. Did you think about the kind of weekend the homeless people in South Africa had this weekend, especially if you were in Johannesburg? It was crazy cold. Anyway, homelessness in South Africa dates back to the apartheid period, obviously. Increasing unemployment, lack of affordable housing, social disintegration, and social and economic policies have been identified as the contributing factors to the issue. And some scholars argue that solutions to homelessness in South Africa lie more within the private sphere than in the legal and political sphere. So basically, a lot of people have argued that homelessness is an issue that should be looked at by our corporates, an issue that can be really can be impacted by people who are within the corporate space. And I think it is a valid argument. I think, government has done the whole RDP situation. I'm not saying it's enough, but I am saying that the RDP situation has sort of helped a few people, although a lot of people haven't been helped. If you did watch the news recently, there were a lot of riots, I know, in Eldorado Park, as they were speaking about the kind of infrastructures that they need and the kind of infrastructures that they aren't getting. And I mean, it's a time where a lot of people get scared because they could lose their lives because of the crazy weather that's going to come. And, although I don't think there is a national consensus as to why there are so many homeless people in South Africa, but researchers have relied on individual studies of homeless people in particular cities, and the South African homeless population has been estimated at approximately 200,000 people are on our streets, and that's crazy to think about when you think 200,000 people are without homes, are also unable to feed themselves, are unable to get themselves any kind of medication, any kind of medical help. It's just really, really sad. And I just thought today would be a good day to actually just think about them and see what we can do as a country, what we can do as communities to sort of really make it a little bit better for them. I know we can't help every single person who's homeless and doesn't have anywhere to go, but what we can do is contribute to programs that are really trying to make sure that their winter isn't as bad as it's going to be. It's going to be really, really, really bad. I know in Cape Town actually has one of the highest rates of homelessness in all of the cities. It has over, I think in 2015, it had over 7,000 people who are on the streets, and I think now it probably doubled, or at least 9,000 people are without homes. And there's actually a really, really cool, I just read about this actually recently about I don't know if you know of Haven Night Shelter. Now, Haven Night Shelter is one of the only one of the biggest shelter charities in Cape Town, and they've relaunched actually their first bed voucher program since it's been like 5 years since this voucher program had been launched, and it is based within 15 Cape Town based shelters. Now, over the years, what happens is that the bid for a ticket system has heralded a number of successes, but also it has also experienced its fair share of hiccups, right? So basically what happened was people were encouraged to buy these sort of tickets, and then these tickets, they'd rather give these tickets to the homeless people so that they can use them to go into a shelter. Now it's about 10 rand a night to sleep at a shelter. Also remember, at Haven Haven Night Shelter, the first 10 days are free for you to sleep if you're homeless, and then after that you have to sort of bring at least 10 rand or some sort of money for you to carry on sleeping. And what they're doing now is that they're selling these tickets to people to say give them these tickets rather than the 10 rand, because they don't usually use it for the right causes. So that's basically what the concept is about, this ticket a bed system. And basically this innovation was started by Hassan Khan from the Haven Night Shelter, and basically it's based on the premise that no one should have to sleep on the street. And I completely agree, no one has to sleep on the street, but if they do, let it be at least a better weather. I can't even imagine how it would be to sleep on tar. With this just weekend going past, I couldn't even imagine being outside for 5 minutes, let alone the whole day, the whole night. It's just too much to think about. But anyway, the program was actually started in 2012 and allowed concerned Capetonians to buy vouchers, as I said, for 10 to 12 rand a piece, and you give them to beggars rather than money. And it enables them to really get out of that self-destructive lifestyle, because a lot of the time, when you give a beggar any kind of money, especially one that isn't necessarily sober, when you give them that money, that money is not going to go to any kind of food. It's probably going to go to a drug or something that's going to make them forget or try and be numb to the experience that they're feeling. Anyway, the voucher does cover the fee for the shelter, and I think that's something to go far from, and I think that's a really great system. I think it's a system that could work in Johannesburg as well. You start really looking at whether or not they actually want to be safe and want to be warm, because it's one thing to have 1 million shelters open, but nobody really wants to go there. It's very important that it's a thing that they know they have it, and they have that sort of psychological thing that says you have access to a bed if you wanted to. You are the one that's really standing in front of your own safety. And I think that's when you make it more of their responsibility than just giving them some sort of money to compensate a few hours with some sort of drug. You give them that voucher to say you have the option to sleep well tonight, and you are choosing not to. So you cannot say that not a lot's being done. You cannot say that people don't care. It is you standing against yourself. And again, a lot of the issues around homelessness is, drug abuse, violence, and a lot of situations that people are running away from and running towards, not being judged and being around people who are doing the same thing. And so you find that a lot of homeless people do have homes. A lot of homeless people do have a space where they came from. It's just specific issues had made them leave. So it's very important that the responsibility is still on them. I think that's very important. There are people who are homeless because of their houses catching on fire, especially if you think of the shanty towns in Johannesburg, especially everywhere in South Africa. A lot of it is not necessarily just because they ran away. It's because they really don't have anywhere to go, but they know that they need to make money somewhere, somehow. But anyway, Hassan Khan from the Haven Night, let me just get the name. It's the Haven Night Shelter has spoken about obviously regurgitating and making sure that they bring back this really amazing initiative about Better Ticket. And they just said, he said that, he realized that they needed something further to encourage homeless people to go to the shelter in the first place. It can't just be money. They don't even that money to them does not necessarily translate to a bed. That 10 rand to them could translate to food, could translate to other things, bets, anything that could be happening on the streets that you know nothing of. So the voucher is just for their safety, and I like that about it. And he also said that, the Haven really needed an incentive for the homeless people to go, because if you talk to guys, he says that there's all kinds of abuse or something else that's keeping them from coming to the shelter. So that's very important to note, that he says it doesn't really help getting somebody in the shelter when they, if he knows that he can get into the shelter. All the voucher does is remind him that the shelter is there, and that at least they have a meal, at least they have a place to shower, a place to trade their old clothes for freshly laundered ones, a place for them to eat, a place for them to sleep. And that's what the program is for. And I think that's important. I think that's an amazing initiative, and I don't see enough of that in Johannesburg. I'm actually not sure about other places in South Africa. There's not enough investigation as to how homeless people, the kind of options homeless people have, and how many of them are willingly going to those options. And what is the issue? Is the issue more psychological than it is physical? Is it an issue of drug abuse? Is it an issue of abuse in general? Or is it an issue of there not being enough shelters, not being enough beds for people to get warm and to get to feel safe? Also, you must remember that a majority of the people who are homeless are children. So for me, it really boggles my mind when I think of children saying no to a warm bed, a meal, and clothes. It means there's something completely devastating at the heart of it, that is some sort of drug abuse, some sort of comfortability with suffering, some sort of comfortability with not having, and some sort of comfortability with fending for yourself. And kids can't. That's not the world I imagine. That's not the world I imagine for a lot of children. I mean, that's not what I want. What I would like a child to think of or even experience, but also think of as something that is normal, and normalizing that kind of behavior, normalizing that kind of suffering. It's really, really, really scary to think about. Also, what happens with the ticket process is that there's a sort of a history that is portrayed on the card. So whatever shelter you go to, they say, oh, this is why. If you left, you say why you left. You write down what happened. Because sometimes there's been a big backlash on these shelters saying children are being abused in them, children are being used, because a lot of the shelter keepers, a lot of the people that are staying there and volunteering their time know how vulnerable these kids are. So abuse becomes a thing that that's everywhere, which means a lot of kids will run from a shelter also because of that, which is so important that these cards then allow them to write down a history, or at least put down an idea as to why they left a specific shelter. And also, if they lost their ID card, or whatever the case may be, they can show their history. They can show where they've been, what needs to happen, because a lot of the time you find these kids and they go into the shelter and nobody knows what they've gone through, nobody knows their thinking process and how they actually are psychologically. And so these cards also help keep track of what they've been through, whether it was a drug issue, if they were in a drug program, a drug rehab program, of course, if they, went through something, if somebody has a personal chip with them, if they feel like someone abused them, they're able to sort of put that down on the card, and that card will then also allow the shelter that they are at to understand the kind of history that they have. Because a lot of the time, they're either really drugged up, they can't even speak about the experience, and they also don't think anybody cares. So I think it's a good way of really making a child remember their worth, remember who they are, remember that somebody cares about your history, somebody cares about the kind of experiences that you've gone through, and it's unfair that those experiences aren't recorded and aren't made important. So there's a lot of things that they're doing. They take the time out at the Haven to check check on you and check on your job search. They also make sure that you are in those 10 days. How can we get you a job? Where can you work? Do you want to work? And I must say, there's so many times when me and my friends actually do this quite a lot, especially in the Braamfontein area. There's a lot of young kids without any home, homeless young kids who are begging. And a friend of mine did try and get one kid to a shelter, and also just sort of be their bigger brother and just sort of help them out where they could and send the money. And the kid went. I think the kid did go to the shelter, but didn't even stay for, I think, 4 hours. After that, was back on the street. And the next few weeks, we kept seeing him and kept reminding him that he should go back. We're going to try our best to get him the help he needs. But it was like talking to a brick wall. So there's a lot of issues around how to communicate with the homeless, how to communicate with kids that are homeless, how to get them out of their constant this sort of 360 circle that they find themselves, poverty circle that they contribute to as well, because of the thinking of, I can't get out. There's no way I can get out. There's no way anybody's going to understand me. There's no way anybody's going to want me back. There's no way anybody's going to think of me or want to help me out. I think also that issue and that abandonment issue is really, really big when it comes to homeless children. But anyway, if you are trying to help somebody who is homeless, or you have that willingness to get someone off the streets, please call the Haven. They definitely believe no one should live on the streets, and they do their best to make sure that less and less children are living in such horrible conditions in the streets, and part of these gangs and part of these cliques and part of these drug mules and all that kind of thing. Their vision is they believe in the future of communities and organizations and governments that can create the supportive network to ensure that no one is forced to live on the streets. The Haven Night Shelter Welfare Organization provides temporary shelter, physical care, social welfare, and family reunification services to adult homeless people in the Western Cape. And they started quite a while ago. They were established in 1978, but were only registered as a non-profit organization in 2000, and are now a public benefit organization in 2004. And I think it's very important that we support these as corporates. We support more homeless shelters, and not support them just financially. We support them by saying, you know what, these are the programs that have worked. These are the programs that can get kids out of trouble, get the right social welfare gurus involved, get the right people to counsel them, get the right people to talk to them, let them not feel like it's all far-fetched and it's all far from each other. Make sure that they have the right programs that can keep the kids there. Keep the kids there, but also adult homeless people. I think there's a lot of that to be spoken about. There's a lot of adults who really want to leave, who really want to be empowered in some ways, and I think it's very important that we look at those people, and we try and see how we can help as people, as corporates, as NGOs, as teachers. It's our responsibility to make sure that no one has to really live on the streets. I mean, it is going to be super, super cold, and this winter is going to be crazy. So it's very important that we don't take it for granted, and we try our best to make sure that homeless people receive the kind of attention that they need, especially during this time. So anytime you see somebody who's homeless, anytime you feel as though you could do something, or you could try and do something, call up the Haven, call up a few of the shelters, call up your local church and see how they can help with the soup kitchens. They're great. I know there's a lot of soup kitchens that are coming up at the moment. I know there's a lot of homeless and programs that are going to be coming up at the moment. Let's just make sure that we know what we can do and how we can help those we see every single day, the mothers we see every single day with kids on their backs, little babies. I still can't understand that, and I don't think we should live in a country that still understands that. So it's very important that we do our best to contribute. I know there's another organization. It's homeless.org.za, and what they do is, again, they also aim to restore the self-worth and the self-esteem of adult homeless persons by addressing their spiritual, physical, and emotional needs. In doing so, they aim to help rehabilitate them back into society. That's homeless.org. Call them, email them, find out where they are, see how you can work with them, see how you can volunteer. And they said, there's numerous ways in which you can get involved with U-Turn Ministries. It's actually called U-Turn Ministries. There's also a program called U-Turn Ministries, where their involvement enables to bring some sort of wholeness to the homeless, and you can make a positive impact. Don't just feel obliged to give them 5 rand, 2 rand because you see that they're cold and you see that there's no place where they can go. Do more. Get involved with the homeless organization. Try and see if you can't give 100 rand a month to a kid and the benefit in their lives, and let's see if we can't really lessen the number of people on the streets, lessen the number of people who are going to be dying this winter on the streets. I know there's a lot of blanket drives that are going to be working out. You've got 67 days of Mandela coming up, and I know you've got 67 blankets, which is one of my favorite organizations too, where they knit blankets for the homeless, knit blankets for those who are needy. It's another way of contributing to the homeless. Find ways in which you can do your little bit, even if it's a warm meal a day to your local homeless person. Do your bit. There's so much to do. There's so much out in the world to do. There's so much you can be part of. There's so much you can do to make sure that people are safe. People are warm this winter. And just speaking from my experience this morning and this weekend, I feel obligated to be part of some sort of organization, either the Haven or a homeless.org or a church or anything along those lines that can really help a homeless person get out of the streets, homeless person get something to eat or get warm. It is my resolution. It is what I want to do. But anyway, that concludes our show for the day. It was really lovely speaking to you, and I really hope you feel obligated to do something about the homeless person down the street, the homeless person at your spa, the homeless person at your Pick and Pay. I really hope there's something that you will be doing to help their lives a little bit better. But anyway, we'll be back again tomorrow with an equally enticing show. We'll have a few guests this week, so I'm so excited about that. Thank you for listening.
Live from 27 Boxes in the heart of Melville, this is brandlive.co.za.